My mom placed her hand on the will like she was pinning me to the table. Then she looked straight at me and said, calm as ice, "You won't get a single cent." The room didn't move. Not a breath, not a blink, just that sentence echoing in my skull. Dylan smirked. Lila hid a smile behind her glass. Something inside me slipped. I set my fork and knife down slowly, like I was laying a body to rest. "All right," I whispered. "Then don't expect a cent from me either." I thought that moment was the betrayal. They didn't know the real hit was still coming. I drove to my parents' house that night, telling myself it was just dinner. Just a quiet evening in the suburbs, 40 minutes outside Portland, with lasagna and small talk and the kind of warmth I used to pretend we still had. The sky was already dark when I pulled into their driveway, the porch light spilling over the steps, like a welcome I didn't fully believe. I should have noticed the tension the moment I walked in, the stillness in the air, the way my mom barely glanced up from the oven, the way Dylan and Lila exchanged that quick secret smile. But I told myself not to overthink it. I always told myself that. Inside the house smelled like garlic tomatoes and the lemon cleaner my mom used every Friday. It was familiar, almost comforting. I hung my coat on the same hook I'd used since high school and stepped into the dining room. The table was set perfectly cloth napkins, wine glasses, candles already lit. They only did this when they wanted something or when something bad was coming. My stomach tightened. "Rebecca, you made it," my mom said without turning around. Her tone was bright, but her shoulders were stiff. My dad gave me a quick nod, the kind he used when he didn't want to talk. Dylan was spreading butter on a roll like he was performing for an audience. Lila sat beside him, tapping her phone screen, the glow reflecting off her glossy hair. "Big city sister finally joins us," she murmured, not looking up. I ignored it. I'd ignored comments like that for years. We sat down. My mom placed the lasagna in the center of the table and smiled like everything was normal. But the atmosphere felt thin, fragile, stretched tight enough to snap. Conversation was awkward at first, work weather, the usual filler. My mom asked about my latest project. My dad mumbled something about needing help with a leaky faucet. The twins whispered to each other. But underneath it all was something else. A waiting. As I cut into my food, I caught my mom watching me, eyes calculating. It reminded me of every time she'd said, "Family sticks together," right after handing me another bill, mortgage payments, utility bills, tuition for Dylan's third major, new equipment for Lila's influencer dreams, repairs for the lake cottage they loved but never maintained. All quietly transferred from my account because as the oldest, I was the responsible one. I used to think helping them meant they loved me, that being useful meant being valued. But lately, every sacrifice felt like it evaporated the moment it left my hands. My mom cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "We're glad you're here tonight, Rebecca. There's something your father and I want to talk about." Dylan straightened in his seat. Lila locked her phone and set it face down, her smirk already forming. My heart dipped a warning I couldn't ignore. Whatever was coming, it wasn't dinner table small talk. It was something else, something I wasn't prepared for. My mom didn't reach for her fork. She reached for the folder beside her plate. A thin stack of papers neatly clipped the top corner already creased from handling. She rested her palm on it like she was claiming territory. "Rebecca," she said, her tone light in a way that made my skin prickle. "Your father and I finalized the will. We wanted you to hear it directly from us." The room shifted. The candles flickered. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to fade. My dad kept his eyes on the table. Dylan leaned back, arms folded, looking far too satisfied. Lila tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, watching me like she was waiting for a reaction. My heart thudded once heavy. "The will, yes," my mother replied, sliding the folder forward. "It's all very straightforward. The house, the lake cottage, what's left in savings, everything will go to Dylan and Lila." The words landed so flatly, so casually, that for a second my mind refused to understand them. I blinked at her, at the folder, at the way she said everything like it was simply the weather forecast. "I'm sorry." My voice came out thin. "You're doing well on your own," she continued as if rehearsed. "You don't need anything from us. Your siblings, however, could use the support. They're still finding their path." Finding their path. That path apparently was paved with my money. Dylan smirked. Just wanted to make sure there won't be any confusion later. Lila's smile sharpened. You always land on your feet, Rebecca. Some of us aren't so lucky. A bitter laugh rose in my throat, but I swallowed it. So let me get this straight, I said quietly. I paid the mortgage every month. I covered the bills. I paid for Dylan to bounce through majors like it was a hobby. I paid to fix the cottage so all of you could enjoy the summer. And I get nothing. My mom exhaled dramatically. This is exactly why we didn't want to tell you yet. You always bring it back to money. Because I'm the only one bringing money. I said, a tremor running under my voice. My dad finally spoke, barely above a whisper. Rebecca, sweetheart, you're stable. You live comfortably. You'll be fine. Your siblings need more help. I stared at him. The man who taught me to ride a bike wouldn't even meet my eyes. Lila shrugged, her tone syrupy. Maybe if you weren't always trying to be the hero, you wouldn't be so upset. Dylan chuckled. Seriously, nobody forced you to help. No one forced me. The words hit harder than they should have. Years of sacrifices, every one of them framed as duty, love, family, evaporated into a shrug. Something inside me steadied like a knot pulling tight. I smiled. Not bitterly, not angrily, just done. All right, I said softly. Then don't expect a single cent from me either. The table stilled. Even the air felt different. I reached for my napkin, folded it neatly, and set my fork and knife down slow and deliberate. Then I stood. Their faces blurred behind me as I walked toward the hallway. They thought the will was the betrayal. They had no idea what they had just started. The drive back to downtown Portland felt longer than usual, like the highway had stretched overnight. Raindrops flicked across my windshield, blurring streetlights into streaks of gold, but I barely saw any of it. My mother's voice kept replaying in my head, calm practice slicing through me with the precision of someone who had rehearsed the moment. You won't get a single cent. By the time I reached my apartment building, a tight ache had settled under my ribs. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, dropping my keys onto the counter with a shaky clatter. The familiar hum of the heater, the faint scent of the vanilla candle I'd burned the night before, everything felt wrong, like my home no longer fit the person who had walked out of that dining room. I sat on the couch and stared at my phone lying face down on the cushion. It vibrated once then again, then nonstop. I flipped it over. 9 missed calls, 4 voicemails, 2 long texts from my mother, then one from Dylan, one from Lila. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I opened my banking app, the screen filled with recurring payments lines and lines of responsibilities that no one ever acknowledged, but everyone expected. Mortgage, bills, insurance. Transfers labeled simply help, a vague little word that covered a decade of sacrifice. My thumb hovered over the first line. A deep breath creaked out of me. Then I tapped cancel. The confirmation popped up. I hit yes. Another payment, cancel, confirm. Then another, cancel, confirm. It didn't feel triumphant. It wasn't revenge. It was something quieter, deeper, like unlocking a door I didn't even realize I'd been trapped behind. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. My mother's voice burst through immediately. Rebecca, what are you doing? Don't you dare cancel those payments. You're acting like a child. I stared at the dark window in front of me, my reflection faint. I'm not your bank, I said, keeping my voice level. You're part of this family, she shot back, and family doesn't treat each other like this. I almost laughed. You mean the way you treated me tonight, Silence? Then, don't twist things. Call me when you've calmed down. She hung up before I could say another word. 20 minutes later, Dylan called. So Mom says you're freaking out over what well, you don't even need. Dylan, you vandalized my boundaries long before any of this, I said. What boundaries you paid because you wanted to? Don't rewrite history. He hung up too. Then Lila. Her tone was sugary, almost bored. Beck, seriously, you're embarrassing yourself. You're lucky, okay? You don't need the inheritance. Let it go. I blocked her. I blocked him. And then because I knew what was coming next, I blocked my mother too. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a clean slate. The next few days blurred into a routine of work silence and brief pockets of relief. My coworkers noticed I looked tired, but no one asked questions. I was grateful for that. I poured myself into a new project that required long hours and travel anything to keep my mind from drifting back to that dining room table. 3 weeks after the dinner, my phone lit up with a group text from my mother. "Family meeting tonight. You owe it to us to be there." A familiar pressure tightened around my chest. Old programming, old obedience. But I typed back one word anyway. Fine. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, the sky was a dull gray, the kind that hangs heavy before a storm. Dylan's car was parked crooked. Lila leaned against the railing, scrolling her phone. My father stood by the doorway, hands shoved in his pockets. My mother waited just inside, arms crossed, lips thin. They looked at me like I was the problem. They had no idea I wasn't the same person who had walked out 3 weeks earlier. I was someone new, someone they couldn't control anymore. Weeks later, the nightmare didn't just hit it, arrived with the cold precision of someone who wanted me to feel it. I had just returned from Sacramento, rolling my suitcase down the quiet hallway of my apartment building. My shoulders ached. My eyes were gritty from the flight, and all I wanted was a shower and sleep. But halfway down the corridor, something felt wrong. The air smelled faintly chemical, sharp, artificial. Then I saw my door. It looked swollen, warped, like something had grown out of it. I stopped walking. Expanding foam, thick, hardened pale yellow, was packed into every crack around the frame. It bulged outward like the door was trying to escape it. I touched it with my fingertips. Solid, dry, set. Someone had sealed my apartment shut. My keys slid uselessly in my hand. For a moment, I just stood there, steadying my breath. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I simply felt something inside me get very, very quiet, deliberate, personal, punitive. My mind landed on Dylan with unsettling ease. Building management took nearly an hour to respond. When the facility's supervisor arrived, he stared at the door, eyebrows lifting. "Someone really wanted to keep you out. That's one way to put it," I replied, voice cold enough to make him glance at me twice. A locksmith came next. It took another 2 hours to chip away the foam without damaging the structure. Bits of dried insulation sprinkled across the hallway floor like confetti from the world's most miserable celebration. When the door finally opened and I stepped inside, I didn't feel relief. I felt resolve. I dropped my suitcase, walked straight to my laptop, and pulled up the hallway camera feed. Fast forward. Pause. Click. Scroll. Then him. Dylan. Hood pulled over his head, baseball cap, low sweatshirt I recognized from last Christmas. He moved with a swagger I grew up watching, thoughtless, careless, convinced of his own invincibility. He shook the can of foam. He grinned. He sprayed every inch of my door frame. And when he finished, he stepped back, admiring his work like some kind of masterpiece. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. My hands didn't even shake. I just hit save. Then I sat back staring at the paused frame. His face wasn't fully visible, but his posture, his shoes, his laugh, they were unmistakable. It didn't even matter if he thought he disguised himself. He hadn't disguised who he was. I called one person, Aunt Nora. She arrived 20 minutes later, still in slippers, her hair pulled into a messy bun. One look at the doorframe and her expression hardened. Inside, I showed her the video. She watched silently until the footage ended. Then she nodded once. "He crossed a line, Rebecca, and you know it." "I do," I said. "You can't keep absorbing their damage," she continued. "They will never stop unless you make them." It wasn't encouragement. It wasn't anger. It was truth. The next morning, I filed a police report. Calm, clear, factual. The officer watched the footage twice and shook his head. "This is vandalism," he said. "You did the right thing." I walked out of the station feeling the kind of clarity you only get when the last thread of guilt finally snaps. The calls started that afternoon. My mother, first rage layered under a thin film of disbelief. "How could you do this to your own brother?" "Do you know what you've started?" I answered evenly. "No, Mom. He started it when he vandalized my home." She ignored that. "Drop the report." "No, you're unbelievable." She hung up. Next came Dad. His tone was controlled, strategic. "Let's fix this quietly. No need to escalate." "It's already escalated," I replied. "He broke the law." He exhaled sharply. "You're punishing him. I'm holding him accountable." He had no answer to that. Then Dylan called. His voice was high, jittery. "You think you can get me arrested over a joke?" "It wasn't a joke. You always act like you're better than us." "I'm safer without you," I said simply. He cursed, yelled, tried to provoke me. I hung up. Lila tried next, sniffling like she was the victim. Rebecca. This could ruin his life. He should have considered that before picking up the phone. I blocked her. Silence followed again, but this time it wasn't guilt silence. It was consequence silence. 2 days later, Dad called again. No greeting, no pretense. "What do you want?" he asked. It was always the wrong question from him. "I want the cost of the repairs reimbursed," I said. "All of it. That's outrageous." "That's the number," I replied. "Or the report stays. Your choice." He muttered something under his breath, then hung up. The transfer arrived the next morning. Exactly the amount I listed in the report. No more, no less. The memo line read, "Settlement." For a long moment, I stared at the screen. Not satisfied, not vindicated, but free. The money wasn't the victory. The boundary was. Later that evening, my mother called one last time. Her voice cracked, not with sadness, but with anger. "You've destroyed this family." I stepped onto my balcony, Portland's cold night breeze brushing against my face. "No," I said softly. "I stopped letting this family destroy me." She inhaled sharply. "I hope someday," I continued, "you understand that boundaries aren't betrayal. Don't expect us to forgive you," she snapped. "I stopped expecting anything from you a long time ago." And I ended the call. That night, standing in the quiet of my apartment, I ran my hand over the new door frame, smooth, clean, untouched. A symbol of something I'd never had before. A life where I wasn't the weapon they used against myself. A life I was finally choosing. In the weeks after the incident, my world shifted in ways I didn't expect quietly at first, then with a kind of momentum that felt like oxygen after years of breathing through a straw. There were no more midnight calls demanding explanations, no guilt-laced voicemails, no lectures disguised as concern, just silence. And to my surprise, silence didn't feel empty. It felt like space. The updates about my family didn't come from them, they came from Aunt Nora, who checked on me every few days. Evelyn had taken a morning shift at a diner across town, her smile reportedly tighter than ever. Thomas worked long hours at a hardware store, visibly worn down. Dylan quit his job again, blaming the stress of everything that happened. Lila drifted between ideas, unable to settle on anything that lasted more than a week. Their crises didn't swallow me anymore. They weren't mine to solve. Meanwhile, my own life began to expand. Work felt lighter, clearer. My manager noticed and offered me a leadership track, something I'd been too drained to pursue before. I slept better. I ate real meals again. My apartment felt brighter even at night, as if the walls themselves had unclenched. I used the reimbursement money not out of spite, but symbolism, to do something I denied myself for years. I booked a 2-week trip to Italy. For once, I didn't ask for permission or worry about who else needed something from me. Florence was warm, golden, alive. Every evening, I stood on a balcony overlooking the rooftops, letting the slow breeze unwind the knots inside me. I realized that this peace independence possibility was what my family had stolen from me long before foam ever touched my door. When I returned to Portland, I joined a hiking group. On my second Saturday with them, I met Alex, a calm, steady presence with an easy laugh. He didn't know anything about my family, not at first. He just talked to me like I was a whole person, not a resource to be mined. It was disarming and healing. Sometimes late at night, I felt echoes of the old pain. Not the sharp kind, just shadows. But they no longer defined me. They no longer controlled me. What surprised me most was this: I didn't miss them. Not really. What I missed was the version of me who had believed love meant self-erasure. But she was gone, and someone stronger had taken her place. I used to believe walking away from family meant failure. Now I know it can mean survival. I didn't lose a home, I left a battlefield. And in the quiet that followed, I rebuilt myself with steadier hands, clearer boundaries, and a life that finally feels like mine. If you've ever carried everyone else's weight until you couldn't breathe, hear me: choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's the beginning of freedom. If this story resonates with you, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story.